There's a particular kind of silence that exists right before someone changes everything. It's not empty, it's pregnant with possibility, heavy with the weight of words that are about to reshape reality. In wrestling, we've heard 1,000 voices scream for attention. But CM Punk? He didn't scream. He whispered truths so sharp they cut through decades of scripted lies like a blade through silk. Straight edge in a world of excess, anti-establishment in a corporate machine, brutally honest in an industry built on beautiful deceptions. This isn't just the story of 5 quotes. This is the anatomy of a revolution, told through the words of the man who dared to speak when silence was safer. These are the 5 quotes that didn't just define CM Punk, they redefined what it meant to have a voice in professional wrestling. Quote 1, "I'm the best wrestler in the world." The declaration that became prophecy. Picture this, it's 2011, and CM Punk is standing in the shadow of his own obituary. WWE has written him off, his contract is expiring, he's been buried in meaningless feuds, and the company he bled for is preparing to forget his name. In corporate boardrooms, he's already a ghost, but ghosts, sometimes, have the loudest voices. This isn't just another wrestler cutting another promo. This is a man staring into the abyss of professional irrelevance and deciding that if he's going to disappear, he's going to burn so bright on the way out that the afterimage will scar everyone's retinas forever. Here's what they don't tell you about declaring yourself the best at anything. It's not arrogance speaking. It's desperation. Not the desperate cry of someone who knows they're lying, but the desperate truth of someone who knows they're right and can't understand why the world won't listen. Punk had been the best for years. In the Indies, where he wrestled his heart out in front of dozens instead of thousands. In ROH, where he perfected his craft, while WWE's Golden Boys were learning their first headlock. But being the best and being recognized as the best, those are 2 different languages, and Punk had been speaking the wrong one his entire career. When he said those words, he wasn't making a boast. He was making a covenant, with himself, with the universe, with every fan who had ever felt overlooked and undervalued. He was saying, "If you won't give me the respect I've earned, I'll take it, and I'll make it impossible for you to deny." The summer of Punk didn't start with a victory. It started with a declaration. And here's the beautiful, terrifying thing about declaring yourself the best. You have to prove it. Every single day. That quote became a prophecy that Punk had to live up to. It haunted him, motivated him, and ultimately delivered him. Within weeks, he was walking out of Money in the Bank as WWE champion, sitting cross-legged on that stage in Chicago, holding up the belt like he was holding up the severed head of doubt itself. But prophecies are cruel masters. They demand sacrifice, and Punk would spend the next few years bleeding to make those words true, until the weight of being the best in a system that didn't want to celebrate him finally broke something inside him that could never be repaired. Quote 2, "I'm just a spoke on the wheel i's gonna keep turning. And I understand that, but I want this company to be better when I'm gone." The pipe bomb that shattered reality. June 27, 2011. Raw has gone off the air, but CM Punk hasn't left the building. He's sitting on that stage, cross-legged like a punk rock Buddha, with a microphone that shouldn't be live and words that shouldn't exist in the carefully constructed reality of sports entertainment. For months, maybe years, Punk has been choking on everything he couldn't say. Every political handshake he watched happen over his broken body. Every time a part-timer returned to take the spotlight he'd earned through blood and sleepless nights. Every meeting where his name was mentioned as an afterthought in his own company. The contract is expiring. He's got nothing left to lose and everything left to say. This isn't just a promo. This is a man performing surgery on the 4th wall with nothing but honesty and a microphone. This quote is a masterclass in controlled destruction. Look at the architecture of it. He starts with humility, just a spoke, acknowledges reality, wheel's gonna keep turning, demonstrates wisdom, I understand that, then delivers the killing blow. But I want this company to be better. It's not anger speaking, it's love. Twisted, complicated, heartbroken love. Like watching your father make the same mistakes over and over again and finally getting the courage to tell him he's wrong. Punk isn't trying to destroy WWE, he's trying to save it from itself. From the politics, the nepotism, the creative bankruptcy, the way it chews up talent and spits out corporate-approved shadows. He's offering his career as a sacrifice on the altar of change, knowing full well that martyrs rarely live to see their revolution succeed. But here's the hidden truth. Within the hidden truth, Punk already knew he wasn't just a spoke. Spokes are replaceable, interchangeable, forgettable. But a spoke that can expose the entire wheel? That can make people question not just the motion, but the machine itself? That's not a spoke anymore, that's dynamite. The pipe bomb didn't just change wrestling, it changed the rules of reality. Suddenly, other wrestlers started asking, wait, we can say that? Commentary teams stopped knowing what was scripted and what was real. Fans started chanting CM Punk in shows he wasn't even on, because he'd given voice to everything they'd been feeling, but couldn't speak. WWE had to make a choice, embrace the chaos or contain it. They tried to do both, and in the process created something that had never existed before. But the wheel kept turning, just like Punk said it would. And when it finally ground him down, when the politics and the pressure and the simple exhaustion of being the voice of the voiceless became too much, he walked away. Not in defeat, but in completion. He'd done what he promised, he'd made the company better. Not in the way they wanted, but in the way they needed. Quote 3, do I have everybody's attention now? The question that commanded the universe. It's July 18, 2011. Raw is live from Boston, and the wrestling world is holding its breath. CM Punk walked out of Money in the Bank as WWE champion, then walked out of WWE entirely, disappearing into the summer night with their most prestigious title like some kind of straight-edge bandit. For weeks, the questions multiplied like cancer cells. Where is he? Is he coming back? What does this mean? The entire industry had been knocked off its axis by one man with a microphone and a refusal to play by rules he never agreed to follow. Then, suddenly, his music hits. Not just any entrance music, but the opening chords of Cult of Personality, each note landing like a hammer blow on the silence of disbelief. The crowd doesn't just pop, they explode, like a dam breaking after months of pressure. 5 words. 5 simple words that contain more power than most wrestlers generate in entire careers. This isn't a question, it's a coronation. Punk isn't asking if he has their attention, he's acknowledging that he owns it completely. The tone isn't desperate or needy, it's the quiet confidence of someone who just reshaped reality through sheer force of will. But there's something else hidden in those words, something that cuts deeper than professional triumph. Validation. For years, Punk had been screaming into what felt like a void, pouring his heart out to audiences who cheered for everyone else's highlight reel. This question contains every night he went to bed wondering if anyone was really listening, every interview where he had to explain why he mattered, every time he watched lesser talents get opportunities that should have been his. Do I have everybody's attention now? Translates to, did I have to burn down everything just to make you see me? And the answer, delivered by that thunderous crowd reaction, was both triumphant and heartbreaking. Yes. Yes, you did. The question created its own answer. In that moment, CM Punk didn't just have everyone's attention, he redefined what attention meant. Not just the fans in the arena, not just the boys in the back, but the entire industry suddenly understood that the rules had changed. Other wrestlers started watching Punk's promos not for entertainment, but for education. How do you command a room like that? How do you make 5 words feel like a seismic shift? How do you turn a simple question into a mission statement? But attention is a double-edged sword. It brings opportunity and scrutiny in equal measure. Every move Punk made from that moment forward would be analyzed, dissected, held up against the standard he'd just set for himself. The question gave him everything he'd ever wanted, but it also trapped him inside the expectations it created. Quote 4. The greatest thing the devil ever did was make you people believe he didn't exist. When the hero became the villain he was always meant to be. By 2013, something inside CM Punk had changed. The revolutionary had become the institution. The voice of the voiceless had become the voice of the establishment he once fought against. And maybe that was always inevitable. Heroes who stay in the game long enough always live to see themselves become the villain. The Undertaker feud was different. This wasn't about corporate politics or creative frustration. This was personal and spiritual. Punk was stepping into the ring with mythology itself, with a man who represented everything sacred in professional wrestling. And Punk had decided that sacred things were meant to be burned down. This quote is Punk looking in the mirror and finally accepting what he saw there. Not the straight-edge savior he'd convinced himself he was, not the voice of the voiceless he'd branded himself as, but something darker, more complicated, more real. The line comes from the usual suspects, but in Punk's mouth, it becomes autobiography. He's not just talking about the Undertaker's mystique, he's talking about his own transformation. The greatest thing CM Punk ever did was make people believe he was fighting for them, when really he was fighting for himself. But here's the beautiful complexity that doesn't make him wrong. Devils can speak truth, villains can expose hypocrisy, and sometimes the people who burn down temples are the only ones brave enough to admit that the temples were already rotting from the inside. Punk had spent years being the good guy, the rebel with a cause, the champion of the overlooked. But good guys have to play by rules, even when the rules are broken. Villains get to tell the truth without worrying about who it hurts. The Undertaker feud was Punk's graduation from revolutionary to final boss. He wasn't fighting against the system anymore. He was fighting against the very concept of respect, tradition, legacy. He was taking everything wrestling held sacred and proving it was just another construct that could be demolished by someone willing to get their hands dirty. But there's a cost to becoming the devil you've been accused of being. Every truth you tell gets filtered through the assumption that you're lying. Every valid point gets dismissed because of who's making it. Punk got the freedom to say anything, but lost the ability to be heard. The quote marked the moment when Punk stopped trying to save wrestling and started trying to end it. Not destroy it, but complete it. Show everyone exactly what it was capable of becoming when someone refused to pretend anymore. Quote 5. I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of not trying. The man beyond the character. 2014. CM Punk is gone, not just from WWE but from wrestling entirely. The man who once called himself the voice of the voiceless has gone completely silent, leaving behind only questions and theories and the kind of legend that grows in absence. Then comes the announcement that defies logic. CM Punk is signing with UFC, not as a celebrity attraction, not as a marketing stunt, but as a legitimate fighter who intends to step into the octagon against men who've been training to hurt people since they could walk. The wrestling world doesn't know whether to laugh or cry. Here's a man who mastered one form of controlled violence deciding to try another. Here's a performer stepping away from performance into something that can't be scripted or predetermined or made safe. This is CM Punk without the character, without the gimmick, without the safety net of kayfabe. This is Philip Jack Brooks looking at himself in the mirror and realizing that every choice he'd ever made was leading to this moment of absolute, terrifying honesty. The quote reveals something that had been true his entire career but never spoken so plainly. Punk's greatest fear wasn't failure, humiliation, or physical harm. It was the possibility of living a safe life, of settling for being really good at something instead of risking everything to discover what he was truly capable of. Wrestling had become safe for him. Not physically, he was still getting hurt, still breaking his body, but emotionally, creatively, spiritually. He could cut promos in his sleep, work matches on muscle memory, generate reactions through sheer professional competence. But competence isn't courage, and courage was what he needed to feel alive. The UFC decision wasn't about proving anything to wrestling fans or critics. It was about proving something to himself, that at 35 years old, with nothing left to accomplish in his chosen field, he still had the balls to be terrible at something new, rather than comfortable with something old. Punk's UFC career was, by traditional measures, a failure. He lost both fights, looked overmatched, and confirmed every critic who said he was just a wrestler playing dress-up in a real fighter's world. But the quote wasn't about winning, it was about trying. And in that context, Punk's UFC run was the most successful failure in combat sports history. He proved that the character hadn't consumed the man, that there was still something real and wild and uncontainable inside the corporate-approved shell. More importantly, he proved that it's possible to walk away from something you're great at to try something that might destroy you. In a world that worships success and punishes risk, Punk chose risk. In an industry that rewards people for staying in their lane, he changed highways entirely. The quote became his epitaph as a wrestler and his birth certificate as something larger, a person willing to risk everything for the chance to discover who he really was when everything familiar was stripped away. CM Punk never played the game. He exposed it. He never followed the script. He rewrote it in real time, with blood and sweat and the kind of honesty that makes powerful people uncomfortable. These 5 quotes aren't just memorable lines from promos. They're the evolutionary stages of a man who refused to accept that professional wrestling had to be fake, corporate, safe, or small. They track the journey from outsider to champion to villain to martyr to human being. In the first quote, we meet the competitor who demanded recognition. In the second, the revolutionary who demanded change. In the third, the conqueror who demanded acknowledgement. In the fourth, the truth teller who demanded nothing. And in the fifth, the man who demanded only the right to try. Wrestling has had louder voices, more successful careers, more decorated champions, but it's never had anyone quite like CM Punk, someone who used the platform not just to entertain but to interrogate, who treated every promo like a philosophy class and every match like a question about what we're all really doing here. He was the voice of the voiceless not because he spoke for people who couldn't speak, but because he said things that others were afraid to say. And in the end, maybe that's the most honest thing of all. Sometimes the only way to find your voice is to risk losing everything else. These weren't just quotes. They were battle cries, confessions, warnings, and promises. They were the sound of someone refusing to be anything less than being real in a world that rewards beautiful lies. CM Punk may have left wrestling, but these words remain, carved into the DNA of anyone who's ever felt overlooked, undervalued, or told to shut up and be grateful for whatever scraps they're given. The voice of the voiceless never really goes silent. It just finds new throats to speak through. Which CM Punk quote cuts deepest for you? And who should we analyze next in this ongoing autopsy of wrestling's most unforgettable voices?